Okay, guys, I feel like yapping again today. So, I feel like I've maybe talked about this before, but it was a while ago. Let me get some water because I'm thirsty. Um, okay, sorry, y'all. I'm actually about to make a snack. Why do I feel like this cup is not correct? Okay, so I watched a video this morning talking about, you know, how basically the trans community um, why the trans community is going downhill. And I just wanted to share my thoughts. I honestly think no one had an issue with trans people existing. What most people don't agree with is the transgender ideologies being pushed um, onto children and in children's spaces. I feel like it really was not even something most people would be aware of or concerned about until it was being shoved down people's throats. And and then people started saying we need to start transitioning kids. And my personal opinions on it is I don't support transitioning children for a number of reasons, but I really just think at the end of the day, the root cause of transgendered people is mental. It's a mental issue, not a physical issue. And I feel like it's not ever addressed in this way. And this is just me speaking from as someone who, I've worked with a trans person before actually at my jobs, a trans woman. I don't remember their name, but I've been around trans people at times. And I had no problem with that coworker. They were very nice. So it's not like I have something specifically against someone being trans. I also know someone from my high school who transitioned after, so a girl who transitioned into a boy. I feel like the biggest issue is the trans community basically trying to force their ideologies onto other people in order for them to feel good about themselves. And I feel like this is where I see the problem lies. A trans person's root cause of their issue is their own thoughts and feelings. Essentially, a person is trans because they personally feel they were born in the wrong body and they should have been born the opposite gender. So it's not an issue that someone else caused them, that someone else pushed on them. It's an issue they struggle with within themselves. It is their own thoughts and their own feelings that convinces someone that they are trans. And I feel like it can sometimes be further further pushed by the people around them. Because I've heard a story of someone who detransitioned, and basically she said at the time, the whole thing, and this is the other part of it, a lot of people who are transitioning, first of all, I don't think there's any such thing as a trans child. That is literally a parent forcing a gender on their child. Um, because children aren't capable of making decisions for themselves. That's why children aren't able to make like medical decisions about themselves until they're 18, until they're a legal adult, because in no other circumstance would we give a child the right to make a medical decision. So any child that is transitioning is really their parent transitioning that child, which to me should be considered a form of abuse, because the long-term effects of transitioning, and I've heard some stories, one of them is osteoporosis and bone problems, because your puberty blockers are not safe. They're not safe for children. They're not even really safe for adults, but they're really harmful, and the full long-term effects are really not known. Also, all of these, like, your body needs hormones to regulate itself. It's not just for the sake of gender. Hormones are necessary for regulating multiple parts of your body. And your sexual organs are also a big part of your body, and your development as into an adult. So honestly, I think there's just so much wrong with all of the things surrounding the trans community, but I think from just a social perspective, right? If someone, if an adult decides they are trans and decides they want to transition, um, um, and be the opposite gender after they're an adult, you can't stop someone from doing that. You don't have to. I feel like whether or not someone agrees with it, that person as an adult can make decisions about their own body. Before that, I of course would not agree with that, because I feel like, you're still a child. But anyways, there's just so much about it that I feel like is problematic. I definitely don't agree with trans um, men or trans women competing in women's sports. And I feel like the fact that we don't hear about trans men in men's sports tells you everything you need to know about why the issue exists to begin with. Because obviously, biological men have physical advantages over women. They always will. No amount of hormones, puberty blockers changes the natural occurring testosterone that makes males stronger than females in most everyday senses. No amount of hormones is going to take that away. And it's really not fair to have biological males compete against biological females, regardless of them identifying as trans or not. I feel like that's just common sense. So I don't have a problem. That was a problem that obviously Trump made that illegal now, which it should have never been legal to begin with. And I feel like this is where people can agree to disagree. I don't care. I'm not saying trans people shouldn't be able to participate in sports. They just should have a category of sports for trans, because it's really not fair to biological women to have to compete against biological men identifying as women. And then there being clear, obvious advantages. I feel like Leah Thomas is the best example of that, for very obvious reasons, because Leah Thomas was competing in male sports up until I think like college, and then decided, oh, I'm a woman, and now they're, taking over a woman's sports because they're competing against biological woman as a biological man that's gone through puberty as a man, developed all of this. It's just like it really was never fair. And I feel like women are the ones who are the most hurt in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of sick men who will use the trans identity to get into women's spaces so that they can do sick perverted things. Like there's so much that is just like I feel like it's always, the impact is always worse for women. Trans men in men's spaces, men are never going to be threatened by a trans man. I don't know one man on the planet who's ever felt threatened by a trans man coming into their spaces, because at the end of the day, men are not threatened by biological females. Most men are never going to be threatened by a biological female. But that same cannot be said in the reverse. So many women have traumatic experiences with men, whether that's because of domestic violence, whether that's because of sexual assault, whether it's because of a number of things. There are so many reasons that it is necessary to separate men's spaces and women's spaces based off of biological sex, not how someone identifies, biological sex. Because there are very real instances and cases of when allowing trans women into female-only spaces, women-only spaces, has created harm. In prisons, women were being raped by trans women. There's so much, like, people all ignore the harm. And it's because people want to cater to feelings instead of thinking about things from an objective stance. How someone chooses to identify, no one can control. But there just should be, objective things put in place to protect, vulnerable populations, such as women and children. I don't understand why people can't see the problems and why that should be necessary. So that's one instance for it. And then I just feel like, as far as like in social settings, the whole you need to respect my pronouns, XYZ, I feel like how someone personally chooses to identify does not give them the right to control how other people use language or control how other people are able to exist in the world. It's a huge demand, basically, where one person says, because I feel this way about myself, you now have to cater to my feelings and use whatever pronouns I tell you have to use. It's kind of like a control issue, in my opinion. I feel like there's such thing as obviously treating people with respect. I really just think it's how you go about it. There are people who accidentally misgender someone because they honestly can't tell. It's like, and that's not their fault. They weren't trying to misgender. And I'll be quite honest, the trans person at my job got misgendered a lot, even by the most well-meaning people, because they identified as a woman, but it's like, no, you could clearly tell the biological male features. It's just like, asking people to pretend they don't recognize a trans person's biology is like you're pretty much expecting people just to lie all the time. And it's hard because your subconscious knows that there's a difference between biological males and biological females, and no amount of makeup and wigs and stuff, it's like people know, children know there's a difference between their mom and their dad. And it's just like, when people this is why I said there gets to a point where you have to recognize everyone can't be delusional. Everyone can't just sit here and pretend, just because they don't want to hurt someone's feelings, that, there's not a biological reality and differences between men and women. So, like I said, it's really hard for some people to it's almost impossible for a person to never be misgendered, especially if they don't really pass for the gender they're claiming to be. And people shouldn't be hated on for that, because they recognize the obvious. Anyways, I don't think you should treat people worse. I also just don't think it's fair for an entire, a very small portion of the population to feel as though they have the right to control other people's language and their common sense and what most people know as objective reality. Because I feel like at the end of the day, everyone who's not trans basically is just a person who accepted their biological reality. It's like the normal, or I should say the norm, or the natural is just however you're born is how you identify. It's not that someone who's born female decided they were a woman. It's literally they just, I'm a female. I'm a woman because that's how I was born. So it's just like forcing the majority of people to pretend to ignore what they know as truth in order to cater to the feelings of a minute group of people, and that minute group of people making a big fuss and being very vulgar and rude and threatening towards anyone who pushes back against aspects of it. I feel like is why a lot of people it's hard for people to continue supporting it. Because some of people are actually just crazy. So yeah. That's all I'm gonna say, I guess. I thought I was gonna have more to say, but I actually don't. It's just, honestly, for me, it's like you almost have to, we're being forced to lie to people in order to cater to the trans community. It's like I'm being forced to pretend and to ignore reality in order to support someone's feelings. And I feel like it's just a huge ask of expecting the entire world to cater to your feelings. Because what other group of people gets to demand the entire world cater to their feelings? No other group of people do we say that's an okay ask. I don't know. That's all, guys. That's all I have to say.